Supervising and Conservation Commission provides TriMet with this public hearing. The purpose of this hearing is to promote public discussion of TriMet's budget. The Commission wants this discussion to promote thoughtful consideration of this and future budget issues. TriMet will make the first presentation this morning, then I will ask our staff to summarize the budget. Then we will ask our questions and discuss the budget with you. Following this discussion, we will take testimony from the public. There are some cards in the back. If anyone from the public wishes to provide comments, you can just sign up and then we'll call your name at the end of the presentations. With that, I'll ask the Commission to identify themselves and declare any public conflict or any conflicts of interest. And my name is David Berenger and I'm the chair.
I'm Mark Wibold, and I'm a Northeast Portland citizen, and I work at Portland State University.
I'm James Offsink, and I'm a TSCC commissioner and also work at OHSU. No conflicts of interest.
My name is Craig Gibbons. I'm staff to the commission.
Toonie Betchart, staff.
Great, thank you. And we have one more commissioner who's probably stuck in traffic. Okay, with that, I'll ask the TriMet people to introduce themselves.
All right. Well, good morning, and thank you, Chair Berenger and the commissioners for being here. I understand this is the first budget you've actually had the pleasure of taking on this year, so we're glad. Hope we started off well for you. I want to give you a few brief remarks about the fiscal year 2018 budget that's before you today, and I just want to remind you, last year, TriMet had an aggressive budget, and I think we fulfilled its goal of that was outlined in that budget of expanding service while working to renew aging pieces of our infrastructure. And just a couple highlights, the things you may remember from the budget. We were doing major max improvements in the Rose Quarter and Southwest 11th Avenue and Morrison at Yamhill. Those were completed on time and with minimal disruptions. One thing we're really proud of, our rail reliability increased from about 83.7% up to 87.2%. That doesn't sound like a lot, but we're continuing to edge upward. You know, I think you had some questions about that, and we'll get into that later. We did expand service on several bus lines. We made it through a number of snow and ice events, not necessarily unscathed, but we did make it through those. And we made tremendous progress on our Hop Fast program, which is now in beta testing, which I also know you have some questions about. And with the budget that brings the board here today, we want to continue with smart investments in growing and improving the overall transit system here in the Portland region. As we begin discussions around the FY 2018 budget, I want to make it clear that we had some discussions with the board about what our priorities were and the key themes and key priorities. Number one, safety. Just want to make that clear. It's something we talk about a lot. The second, and not necessarily in any order after that, was expanding service through our service enhancement plans, maintaining and preserving the system, in other words, keep it running and keep it in good condition, improve system reliability, building ridership through quality service and innovation, and then advancing regional corridor projects. And the next one is the Southwest Corridor project that we're working on to hope to get that funded and underway. So what you see before you in the budget accomplishes those directives that we think in a very well thought out strategy. The budget does remain consistent with the board fund balance policy and our pension funding policy, which I think we talked about in past years. And it also fits within a framework of a strategic financial strategic financial plan that this board has carefully developed and adopted. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Neil McFarland, TriMet's General Manager, to walk you through some of the details.
Okay.
All right? Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you don't mind, Mr. Board President and Chair, just to do some introductions.
Yes, please.
Of the
Oh, that's a good
TriMet,
idea.
team and staff, and perhaps we could
That's a
start
good
with
idea.
Board Member Stovall.
Travis Stovall, I represent District 6.
I'm Linda Simmons, and I represent District 3.
And Randy.
Randy Stedman, Labor Relations and Human Resources. I'm John Gardner, I oversee transit. Good morning, Doug Kelsey, Chief Operating Officer.
Dee Brookshire, I'm Chief Financial Officer.
Nancy Young, Director of Budget and Grants Administration.
Good morning, Chris Tucker, Director of Revenue Operations. Good morning, Steve Witter, Executive Director of Capital Projects.
Bernie Bottomley, Executive Director of Public Policy.
Harry Support, Executive Director of Safety and Security.
Lori Bauman, I'm a member of the board, District 4.
Craig Prosser, Board Member, District 7, which is essentially Clackamas County.
T. Allen Bethel, District 5 Vice President.
And I apologize, my name is Bruce Warner. I'm the president of the TriMet Board and represent District 1. Thank you very much.
Who needs no introduction? But, thank you very much. And perhaps
you.
just to build on Chair Warner's remarks, we have crafted this budget around the board's established sets of priorities, which were really part of a very thorough discussion earlier with our Finance and Audit Committee as well as the full board. And just to note some of those major elements that are included under those themes. Under the theme of safety, we have included the funding for a number of enhanced pedestrian crossings, particularly in the older segments of our line, east side, but also the west side. We also have a great deal of effort associated with our rail operators' rule compliance. We had a safety audit in the last year that indicated we have some work ahead of us, and that work is well underway. And we certainly can speak further about that. We're continuing our implementation of a safety management system, which will be a federal requirement, is a federal requirement, but more than that is an important way to really try to instill a culture of safety throughout every part of TriMet. We've continued recertification training for our operators and actually added some training resources associated particularly with the rail side. And we have continued investments in upgrading our CCTV system so it's digital and more automatic, and frankly, we've had the ability to have that in the past. Under service, this budget proposes to increase our bus service by about 4.1%, which is one of the larger percentages we've seen, at least I've seen since I've been general manager. And it also has some substantial investments associated with improving reliability of our service, both on the bus side as well as on the rail side. And we're happy to discuss some of those initiatives with you further. We also have a number of investments associated with maintaining and preserving the system. I have the sort of perspective of being around TriMet for a while. While when I started, we had a brand shiny new light rail system, and that system now is 30 years old in terms of the east side system, going on to 31, and that means a number of investments are necessary, and that will continue and increase as we begin to see the aging of our other pieces of infrastructure, the west side and the other alignments coming up. So under improving reliability, we have improvements in our control center staffing. We're adding more personnel related to maintenance, particularly focusing on a new quality assurance program within our maintenance department to make sure that when we fix something, it's a permanent or close to permanent fix. And more personnel in the maintenance workforce, which is key to the reliability of the system, as you can understand. We're looking to build ridership through quality service and innovation. And again, the service increase is, I think, key to that, but also continuing to improve the services that we currently offer. And as Board Chair Warner noted, we're advancing regional corridor projects, and we're working on really two. One is our Division Transit project, and the other is the Southwest Corridor. And we're certainly happy to answer any questions you may have like that, about that. And I would just note that we're continuing to see the benefits of the increase in the payroll tax rate that the board approved in a year ago, September. So we're into that ramp up of service, which is a gradual ramp up. We have lots of demands and requests for more service around the region, and we're responding to that, but there still is, even at 4.1% increase, which is a large increase, there's a certain pace that we have to limit ourselves to related to the resources available. And also just to note, for the 6th year in a row, we will not have a fare increase for our riders. And indeed, the most recent fare action the board took was to reduce the price of the youth pass, youth fare. So I would also just note one of the great projects that we have underway right now, and I suspect you'll have more questions about this, is our Fast Pass, our electronic fare system, and we're really excited to be bringing that to our customers beginning this summer. Some of us are beginning to use it even now as we speak. So I think this builds on the past budgets that you've seen. It builds on the investment program that you've seen, but it also responds to the board's established priorities and strategic financial plans. So we think it's a good, solid spending plan, and look forward to your questions on that.
Thank you. With that, Craig, did you want to make a presentation?
I can add nothing to that other than just a fundamental fact is that the budget is only increasing less than 0.5% this year from last year. All of that.
Okay. Let's see, so we start our questions then? Okay. I'll take the first one, which is on the Hop Fast Pass, which you guys introduced to us, at least last year we talked a little about, and I think even the year before you probably had a little bit about it. So it's about ready to go live in July, and seems to be happening on time and on budget. If that's true, if you could let us know, and how the testing is going, and what lessons you've learned, and what you might do differently, and how this will affect. Well, I'll do the other one last. So let's just talk about is it on time and on budget, and what have you learned so far?
So I'm going to allow our resident IT board expert to talk about this a little bit. Travis?
So thank you very much for the question. The Hop Pass is a critical step forward for TriMet, and we look forward to its rollout. It is actually on time and running on budget, and we are actually in our beta test right now. So we're looking at the July rollout, and one of the big things that is part of the rollout is making sure that we've got this available to our ridership, and part of that process is making sure that we've got a number of retailers that are actually selling the cards and giving access to our riders. Currently, we have about 1,000 beta testers who are currently beta testing the system, and on a daily basis, we get very few calls, and that's a positive as we look to roll out the full system later on this summer. We've got very few issues, and frankly, it's exceeding our expectations, how the rollout has gone. But as you know, I don't know if you remember from prior years, there was a lot of preparation that went into this. We're not the first organization, the first transit agency that it's rolled out an electronic fare card. And so we actually have access to resources of various organizations and consultants. CH2 has been a critical help as we've gone through the process. And they've been very helpful in ensuring that we have access to other organizations that have rolled this out and rolled it out effectively. So we've learned from those processes, and we're able to incorporate a lot of that stuff into our implementation and rollout of the program. Chris Tucker, head of revenue, has been just a phenomenal leader in moving this effort forward, and I'm sure he could add some things if I've missed it. But we are excited about the rollout of the Hop Fast Pass, and it's going well. When I ride, I see people who are excited about it and talking about it, so we're ready to get it rolled out. But again, it's going very, very well as far as we can tell, with the limited amount of calls that come in on a daily basis. So I don't know if Chris has anything to add on top of that in regards to that question.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. I would just add that what we're most pleased about is the system is very intuitive to use, and that's, as Travis mentioned, that we are only seeing a few calls a day, which is important. So I think the strategy of the very slow, methodical testing is working well for us. Some of you may recall that we started testing the system 18 months ago. So as we iterate and add to it, we're very careful to thoroughly test each step of the way.
So you've got 1,000 testers right now. Is it going to gradually go, or just when it goes live, it'll just be available to everybody?
Chris can go ahead and answer that.
Sure. So as I mentioned, the methodical piece, we're adding about 500 users every 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
And we're going to
so
ramp up.
So it's just 1,000 today.
It's 1,000 today, which will continually ramp up every 2 weeks to make sure that we're ready to go this summer.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Can I ask just a quick factual question on that too? So Director Stovall indicated the importance of retailers who are selling the cards. So how many retailers are carrying it right now, and what are you hoping it will grow to at time of implementation?
Yeah, so currently we control the disbursement of the physical cards. So they're not in retailers today.
Okay.
We're mailing them to our beta testers. If we put them in stores, everyone would go get them, and
right.
they would be gone.
That makes sense.
We've got over 100 retailers you can reload at today, and we will be at 500 this summer, at which time cards will be in those retail stores. And once they're in the stores, we let the public know they can all get the cards and reload. We just want to make sure we don't run out.
And with that, you said 500
Yes.
retailers will carry it, and do you feel like that's a pretty good spread across the city, that the people, it'll be pretty accessible no matter where you live?
Yeah, we think so. We were careful on which ones we chose. Pretty early on, we wanted to also add Plaid Pantry to the mix, which has another 100 stores. We were successful in doing that. Their integration's happening today. We will not stop looking at other retailers to add those. So it's really going to be ongoing. So if any gaps are identified, even after we roll out, we want to plug those gaps and add those retailers.
Perfect, thank you.
One of the aspects of FastPass that we talked about last time was that you're going to cap the daily charge against that card. And we were just wondering if that would have any revenue impacts for you.
Yes, it will, actually. Yeah, as you can imagine, it does have an impact. Ultimately, our early estimates have us at about $1 million annually in regards to a revenue decrease. And part of that's going to be offset by the reduction in cash collection cost. So over time, as folks gravitate more and more towards the FastPass and the electronic fare system, we'll see less and less utilization of cash, which then lowers our requirement to send actual physical folks out to actually collect that cash from all the ticket machines all around the region. So there's going to be an offset of that cost as we see a decrease in the fare capping. But the fare capping is really going to benefit a lot of our customers. One of the areas that we see the utilization of the daily cash payment system are folks who are generally are frequent riders and are transit dependent. And so they're going to see a benefit from this, because what happens is once they've ridden 20 times in a month, then they actually stop paying the rest of that month. So they get the benefit of buying a monthly pass per se by utilizing the daily system, which historically they didn't have. They would have had to have purchased day passes or rides throughout the entire month. So that's something that's going to be a significant benefit, specifically to our transit-dependent riders. Again, we see roughly about $1 million in revenue decrease, but we see that actually diminishing over time as we offset it by the lower cash collection cost over time. So we do see an initial cash hit, not necessarily cash hit, but revenue hit, but again, offsetting over time. But we see it as a significant benefit to the folks that ride the most and the folks that need it the most.
So the cap will be equal to what a monthly pass would cost?
That's correct.
So these people typically don't buy monthly pass even though they use it more than, okay.
That's correct. Generally they don't have the access to the cash per se to purchase the monthly pass at one set time. And so generally they're buying $250 passes throughout the month. So this is going to see a great benefit for those folks.
Definitely.
That's going to be terrific for PSU students.
Yes, exactly.
So I have the next question. What is the status of discussions about a low-income fare program? And how would this program be funded? And then I have a second part, but I'll let you take the first part first.
So maybe I can take that question, since I've been involved in a committee along with Neil and John Gardner with the region on how we actually want to implement and look at this program. And I think this other discussion we just had is very important, because I do believe one of the most important group of riders that are going to benefit from the capping is the low-income folks, because they're the ones that really don't have the cash to go out and spend the dollars on a monthly basis for pass. So to answer your question, in 2016, we initiated investigating a regional low-income fare program, and over probably the last 6 months, I think we just concluded, 2 months ago, Metro and TriMet convened a group of stakeholders of about 22 folks, including cities, counties, interest groups, and to get an understanding of what's going on around the United States. And actually look to the north. Seattle is one of the big examples, and Director Prosser and I spent some time up there before they actually implemented it, so we know what they were doing. But it's been very interesting to learn. And the intent of this task force was really look at what are kind of the basics of the program. What are the income thresholds? How do we implement it? Who does the means testing? And then again, how can we actually work together to make this happen? And then, of course, the final question you had is how do we fund it? I'm pleased to say that at the end of the work, the committee really did agree on a final program design and a variety of resource development strategies. The number one approach is is looking at the state transportation package, which is being discussed down at the legislature right now, as the major funding source for this program. What I'm just pleased is those folks down in Salem understand the importance of transit, not only in this region, but around the state. And so we think there's a good chance that there may be some additional resources made available for transit for us and for others. We agreed, the general manager and myself agreed and told the committee, and we've told the legislature that if a new transportation funding package is approved by the legislature, this will be one of the prior programs that we'll be looking at to implement. And one of the main reasons of getting this group together was to really help build the partnerships, because I think it's fair to say we don't think TriMet should be in the means testing business. We think that we can work with our non-government organizations as well as the counties on how to actually qualify folks for this program when it's actually up and running. But it's clear after the legislature is done, we'll reconvene this group, look at what needs to be done based on the outcome of the legislature, and if we're not successful there, we'll be looking at Plan B. So I think that's the basics of the answer to your question. Was I responsive?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. So then the second part of that question is, I was reading the Tribune, and they did a piece on TriMet's new fare procedures policy, and as I understand it, it allows for partial payment of fares. And what my question was is, with a partial payment system, what potential impacts do you envision that might have on your income stream?
You take that one, yeah.
Well, let me just maybe clarify. TriMet is asking the legislature for authority to establish its own adjudication program, if you will, for fare citations. And that would allow the board to ultimately approve a whole series of sort of new steps associated with that. The details are to be developed, but right now what we're asking is the authority not to have a fare evasion citation immediately go to the courts, but to have a period of time where we can offer either a reduced fare or a reduced payment citation, or even community service or some other alternatives that may be available. But the ultimate goal is to get people to pay their fare, and it's not to issue citations or adjudicate citations. So what we're looking forward to is a little bit more flexibility if the state legislature grants it, to really develop a program that really helps us encourage fair payment on a broad basis. I would also note that follows up, and John may have some additional details about a very detailed deep dive into the data of fare evasion and what happens to those who are in the system. And one of our goals here is really to decriminalize fare evasion in all circumstances that we possibly can, and really just focus on getting people to pay the fare. Nobody should, have a record because of a $2.50 violation. But yet we have the importance of really the integrity of the fare system that has to be maintained. So we're walking a balance there that we're looking for, and we believe this additional authority from the state legislature would really help us achieve that. So we can certainly provide some further information.
No, that's terrific. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And I have the next question as well. TriMet's unrestricted fund balance has been more than 30% of operating expenses for the past 3 years. In our experience, that's high. And we were wondering, why does TriMet maintain unrestricted fund balances at that level?
That is one I can address.
Okay.
A number of years ago, we had adopted the Strategic Finance Plan Guidelines, which set up the parameters for the management of TriMet's financial system. One of those guidelines calls for maintaining a fund balance equal to 2.5 times monthly expenses. And that's really to protect cash flow. In addition, we can put additional money in fund balance if we know that there's a large project coming up in the future. And then, so we generally start out with a percentage of between 14 and 18% in our fund balance. And what we've noticed over the last couple of years is we end up with more carryover than we anticipated. It's primarily capital projects, but there can also be other large projects or contracts where the expenditure plan ended up lagging what expectations, and so the money falls into ending fund balance, which of course then rolls over to beginning fund balance, and then we rebudget those expenses the following year. So it's a combination of things. On the carryover side, we are looking at that more closely. It's difficult to schedule expenditures on capital projects because there are a lot of unknown contingencies out there, but nevertheless, we want to see if we can tighten that down a little more and make sure that we're budgeting only those projects that we can get done within the fiscal year. You know, not planning on carryovers. So that explains how we got to that higher level.
Thank you.
James?
Yeah, so TriMet is committed this year, as you said in your presentation and last year in your opening remarks as well, to improving on-time performance of the buses Max and Wes. Can you talk to us about the progress that you've made on this commitment, what has been implemented so far, how you're measuring progress, and what the plans for the future are?
I think Doug or Neil could, you want to start, Doug?
Sure, I'll maybe kick this part off. Maybe I'll divide the comments into three parts. So first of all, talk about Max, and then Wes, and then thirdly around the bus system. In the case of Max, back in early 2016, we put a team together and we started looking at the long-term trending of the on-time performance for Max, and we could see over quite a number of years it was slowly eroding. So with a really cross-functional team, we put a robust plan together to attack this. So when we started, we were somewhere around 79.7% over the previous year, and that had been declining at the back end of that 12-month period. We're now tracking, currently, in fact, just checking the numbers on every day, the last 31 days, we're actually at 87.9%. Wow. So we've come up substantially, and in fact, one of our really intelligent analysts and I were just looking at some of the numbers. In fact, the first time since tracking, we've had 8 days in a row, the last 8 days, including this morning, is actually over 90%. Wow. So we're on our way. The goal is, job one was stabilize an eroding on-time performance model, but now the team is just showing tremendous focus. That focus is really unbundled into several key areas: infrastructure, training. We have some great operators out there. We had a lot of new operators out there, and we always go through a curve of how do you get them settled in on a growing and complex railway. Back in 2007, we had a few lines. Now we're up to 5 lines, and with that, the terrain for each is very different. So we have tremendous more amount of work to continue to do here, but I think the team should be proud of what they've been able to achieve so far over a relatively short period of time when there's a lot of it is culture and attention to detail. So that would be the Max system overall.
Can I just ask a quick question on the Max operator?
Sure.
How long does it typically take, do you find, to get somebody what you would consider trained on Max operation?
Well, they go through, the initial training class is about 12 weeks.
Okay.
However, that's just before you get out there and you, so to speak, get the credentials and the keys to go do it. But there's still, if you talk to experienced operators, they'll probably tell you it takes about 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
In today's world, we have to accelerate that up. And so, as Neil referred to in the opening remarks, we're investing more in trainers. We're even looking at things as part of our safety audit, virtual reality simulators, where multiple people can get on and put the goggles on and go over the same area where they may need help on an accelerated basis. So that curve is too long and for the future, we've got to shorten that up to help our operators deal with, you know, a complex network. So
Thanks.
in terms of Wes, I think Wes is at a wonderful stage where, frankly, it's a top-tier performer on a consistent basis. So if we look at where we should spend management time on-time performance, it's really one where it just says maintain. And it deals with, you know, a low day for them typically would be around 95%. So you're at 95 to 98, 99% on-time performance for a really tight run model of a commuter rail service. So we just think in fact, some ways best stay out of their way and let them run it because they're doing a great job. In the case of the bus system, similar, we're at the early stages of this, and this one will take quite a bit of time because of the complexity of 86 or so different lines out there. And we're running on you know, public infrastructure here, not just our own, as you would on MAX, where we've got our own controlled infrastructure. So we are at, last year we were at 81.1%. I can report right now, we're actually tracking, just in a few months getting into this, actually at the 86% mark in just about 3 to 4 months. So again, it's getting into the details, it's culture, it's you know, tracking your yard departures, not only on trains for MAX, but the same for bus. So it's, and the teams, we're still at the early stages, so I think longer term, we have the long-term plan to get into that 86 to 90% range over time. So early days, and that will take some time, but progress is evident.
So those numbers on the buses, how long were you saying it had improved 5% over?
Well, last year's was 81.1 for the whole year.
Yeah.
Right now, if we compare it to, we're at 86.3% over the last literally 31 days.
Wow.
So we've literally, just in the early months since end of last calendar year, come up over 5 percentage points, which is
huge.
pretty significant for it to start off. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Just a follow-up question on that. How do you measure on-time performance? I mean, you've got things like construction, you've got weather. I mean, do you take those into account and kind of neutralize them? or-
Sure. Well, no, our customer doesn't really care.
Okay.
That's, you know, there's sometimes we have controllable events. 2/3 of the events are controllable. About 1/3 of our events, we've had a lot of ice storms this year. We've had some pretty challenging weather. We may not be able to control what occurs to us, but we do own the response from thereafter. So the team's been really trying to move to more of a NASCAR-like approach. How little time does it take to remove a fallen tree, to implement response tactics that we may have taken a longer time before to get to. So it all counts to the customer, and so we don't let ourselves off the hook. It's any and all factors go into it, whether it be on the train or on the bus system.
Any improvement during the last winter was very impressive then.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a great point. There's no doubt there are some days where, you know, Mother Nature is going to win, and we have to figure out how we respond to that. I would just like to take a second to thank our team. And in my experience in this industry over a number of years, including other agencies, I don't think I've ever seen a team respond so well for so long. A lot of teams are good for the event, but doing it day in, day out, we literally went for weeks and weeks. And again, particularly the maintenance team, where they don't get to rest. When the snow chains have to come on, they got to repair them. Everyone thinks we're just back to normal service. They got a tremendous amount of catch up back to the maintenance facilities to make sure we're good for service that next day.
Very good, thank you.
You said that you have a 3 to 5 year training loop for new drivers?
No, I'm sorry if I said that I was incorrect. If you talk to top operators, they'll indicate it takes about 3 to 5 years for them to get really, really proficient at this particular network.
Okay.
Our initial training program is about a 12-week program, and then we monitor thereafter through a probationary period and with post check-ins and
Oh,
evaluations.
okay. I guess I misunderstood. I guess my question is, so what is the retention for trainer or for new bus drivers? How long do they stay in the seat?
I don't have the exact statistic. We can sure get that for you, but I think it's actually quite high. I think we're in the we'd be in the like high 80s, if you will. But they may choose to go back if they're driving. You have to be a train operator. You have to go through being a bus operator first. in all cases. In the case of bus operators, some don't make it because of the qualifications, the testing, the rigor we put them through. Some elect that it's not their career choice. But all in all, if you talk to most operators, they're pretty glad they're getting the privilege to serve the public like that. So pretty low percentage of turnover overall.
Okay, I have the next question.
May I?
Oh, sure.
You might explain how many systems we have on the light rail?
Sure, yeah, on light rail, we have 5 different lines. They're all very different, so it's not as though you could train someone you could train them on the principles of how to drive a train. But you have to going over the Tillicum Bridge, for example, is a very different maneuver of switches and knowledge needed, for example, than it would be, say, out in Hillsborough area. So each terrain is very different and has to be learned, and that takes time.
Okay. So my next question, I just have a little bit of a preface. When I drive around, I see flashing on the front of your buses, TriMet is hiring. And we see in the budget that you're going to hire like 78 positions, things like that. So you're definitely in the mode of hiring people. But you've got competition. You've got Seattle and San Francisco and other West Coast cities that pay, I think what we've heard is, very attractive wage and benefit programs. So with this job market favoring job seekers, it's very difficult to attract and maintain qualified people, it would seem to us. So we're just wondering what you've kind of done to make that happen, and especially since you've had to pare back some of your non-represented employee benefit packages.
I'm prepared to at least begin to answer that question, and then I'll turn it over to Randy Stedman to really fill in maybe some more detail. But you're absolutely correct. The job market does favor job seekers, and particularly for technical workers and IT professionals in particular. And we are maintaining our ability to attract and retain talent. For non-represented employees, TriMet closed its defined benefit plan in 2009 and adopted an 80-20 medical plan in 2012. Then, during the recession, we largely curtailed salary increases for non-union employees. So the combination of those two actions did create a flight risk for us, and particularly toward the end of 2013, as the economy improved and technical staff were in demand. For example, non-represented employee turnover spiked to 13.49% in 2015, and voluntary turnover, excluding retirements and terminations, is about 0.5%. So you can see that there was some flight there.
Mm-hmm.
And with historically low unemployment in the Portland area, now below 4%, turnover for non-represented employees dropped to 11.36% last year as a result of some mitigation efforts that took hold. And I'm going to refer to Randy Stedman to maybe specifically talk about some of those mitigation.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Well, despite the increased competition and low unemployment rate, we've still maintained an 86% acceptance to offer ratio, which is extremely high. Where we have noticed strains on the recruitment system is in the time to fill metric that we also track. So it is currently about 74 days. That's down actually from last year at about 90 days, but above where our target is, which is 60 days. So that low unemployment has had an impact, but in terms of our ability to close on candidates that we want to come to work, we've been successful. There's a number of mitigation steps that we put into place as we noticed this flight risk in 2013. One is to simply maintain what is a very good healthcare package. Although it's been pared back, it still allows us to compete very favorably with the private sector on healthcare benefits. Secondly, we have made sure and done a lot of work to make sure that our midpoints of our salary ranges are at the market, and where we are attracting people, make sure that we are offering wages that are commensurate with their knowledge, skills, ability, and experience. For internal candidates, we have, where warranted, and within our budget, done market adjustments to reflect, to make sure somebody is in the salary range at a place that is commensurate with their experience and knowledge, skills, and abilities. We've also added some recruiting resources to help us, especially for IT and technical positions. We've added a technical recruiter, high-level technical recruiter to work on those positions in particular, and reallocated some resources by implementing an automated reference checking software, which is probably the best $50,000 that I've ever spent, because it frees up the recruiting resources to build candidate pool, more value-added activities. So I think some of those mitigation steps have taken hold and allowed us to maintain a very high acceptance to offer ratio.
Did you say that you added a dedicated position for IT recruiting?
Yes, it's a contract position at this point.
I see.
It's working on more than just the IT positions, but the upper level positions and the more difficult positions would tend to be the IT positions and engineering positions.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I have the next question. The amalgamated transit union contract or bargaining agreement expired in November 30th, 2016. And so we are wondering how negotiations are progressing on a new contract, and is there an expected timeline for reaching an agreement?
Joe, do you want to start that and maybe tag team again with Randy?
I just retired, excuse me, mostly after 30 years with the IBEW Electrical Workers Union here in Portland. One of the things you learn, you don't mess in another union's negotiations. So I'm not going to say a word about that because it isn't the right thing to do, and plus we have a staff to take care of that.
The parties have had 3 bargaining sessions beginning on January 9th. They have 5 additional sessions scheduled through June 15th, and that's against the backdrop of the 150-day bargaining period, which technically ends on June 8th. That's just a date after which either party can seek mediation if they choose to do so, or they can continue to bargain if they choose to do so. Thus far, we haven't had any actual tentative agreements or TTAs, tentative agreements as yet. We've been working on package offers on a number of proposals that have mutual interest by both parties. We haven't gotten any agreed to yet, but I sense that there are areas within those packages upon which we could agree. It's just that we've been working with packages and the entire package hasn't been accepted, so their entire package fails. But there are areas where we have mutual interest. So that's the status. I don't have a date by which we would conclude. That's entirely dependent on how the parties progress in negotiations, and we're still in the middle innings of the talks.
Thank you.
I will say this is not unusual with sort of public sector unions having negotiated at the city, the county, and the court. So it's a different process than the private sector unions. So.
And that you mean the packaging?
The timelines, etc. We don't have a pen board. We negotiate with our contractors, and it's much different.
Okay.
So we have a number of questions about the new TriMet Transit Police Station. So starting with, I think, how the relocation will be funded and if it'll cost more or less to operate in a new location or the same.
May I ask Director Bethel to take a little first shot at that, and maybe ask Harry to fill in some of the details.
You're correct. There are a lot of questions you have, and there are a lot of questions that people have as well about what's happening around the new transit police department. But the funding for this source is identified as a relocation of the current transit police department, which is downtown.
2 blocks that way.
Just a couple of blocks that way. I've been leased for a number of years. Cost of that lease has been increasing, as well as the space is not large enough. We're outgrowing the specs. So in terms of being able to have a new place where the police can be and partnering along with the convention center and Metro and building a new garage and taking a condominium type of interest in there will allow TriMet to have property that it can be used, but it also will have savings over the long run of being an owner as opposed to being one of the continuing to lease. So the funding that's coming is specific for the transit build out of that particular space. If those funds were to be used for anything else, it can't be done. It has to be used only for the construction of the new transit police department. And I'll stop at that in case Harry wants to give any more on that piece.
No, I think you described it accurately. We did do a cost-benefit analysis, and it was determined that it was in TriMet's best interest to build out rather than continue to lease, and there will be a need to remodel the current facility in the future. And the amount of remodeling that has taken place to date has really been fairly minimal, but we have there are several issues with the current facility that really warrant us looking elsewhere or doing a major remodel on the facility.
I might, if I could, just add a thing or two about that, and ask actually Dee to respond to some of the other issues about sort of the bonding limitations that we have. But I would also just note that, you know, this is really taking this lease space, moving it to purchase owned space ultimately. We thought this was a great opportunity, first of all, because the location of this garage space, which is right at our Rose Quarter Transit Center. So it is really easy to deploy our police in multiple directions on multiple lines. They're really a very busy part of the system. So that was very admirable. And we thought it was also admirable to help our partner agencies develop the headquarters hotel, which has been one of the region's economic development goals for really quite some time. And perhaps I could just turn to Dee for the issues of funding and the source of funds for this one-time improvement.
Sure. The project's currently estimated, which includes the relocation, at about $12 million. And it's primarily bond funded. We have some one-time only general fund capital dollars allocated to this as well. The question has come, could this be used on other capital projects? As with all of our bond funding, we do include the ability to substitute other capital projects for bond proceeds. So yes, the funds could be, but they've currently been dedicated to this project.
Okay, thank you. And as part of Director Bethel's comments, he indicated that the cost analysis is based on an expansion of the force. So we're interested in understanding what the justification is for that expansion, and if the cost analysis would still pan out if the force were not expanded, or in fact if it decreases.
So let me just note that it was based on the current costs.
Okay.
Right.
Moving forward. That's the analysis we did. But I would also say that this potential space has other uses for us in terms of deploying, for example, fare inspection forces or others, or other operations assistance on street, customer service staff as well could benefit because of the location of the space. So we think it will have multiple uses ultimately. Again, our view was that, my view is that there will be expansions of the police force over time. They're not included in this budget at this point in time. But I think keeping the system safe and keeping our crime rate low, which it is right now, continues to be a really key focus of all of our efforts.
Could you help me understand why you think that the police force will need to expand over time?
Well, certainly the system is growing.
Yeah.
And for example, if we're successful in beginning funding the Southwest Corridor project, there's expansions associated with that. The bus service is continuing to grow. We expect that this sort of look over this decade of ramping up the payroll tax, we'll have at least 100 additional buses in our fleet and sort of multiply that out on the streets in terms of response times and the need to respond. And again, a lot of what our police force does is really focused on the safety of both our operators and our passengers. And so if you have a bigger footprint, we'll need ultimately additional resources. We report to the board annually on the crime rates and statistics and situations. That has, over the last year, provided additional focus, for example, on the issue of operator assaults, which is increasing, dangerous, very sadly. But for example, we will need additional resources to begin to respond to some of those issues as they emerge in the system.
Thank you. So just two more questions on the funding aspects. So could you help me understand how much interest is going to be paid on the principal for the police station project?
We'll have to calculate that for you. You know, we have a fairly low interest rate on the bond issue itself, and the project was named in the issue, so it's less than, that's about 3.7%.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
And just a note related to the sort of bonding issues, TriMet does have a AAA bond rating from both rating agencies.
Congratulations.
We're very proud of that.
Unusual for a transit agency.
Indeed. And the other thing that I would say is that our, if you will, our debt service within our overall repetitive resources or continuing resources is very low, under 6%, well under 6%, which is the guideline in one of the board's strategic guidelines.
That's great, thank you. And so just last question on the funding part then. So the funding source for the debt service specifically will just be general revenues, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Our next question is on the Federal Transportation Administration, which has mandated a transit asset management plan with a 2-year reporting requirement. What do you anticipate the impact of this plan will be in your organization, and what will be the first thing that you do once that plan is completed?
Maybe ask Director Baumann to take a shot at that.
Yes, so we've asset management is always important to TriMet. We've already heard this morning about some of the aging aspects of the MAX system that TriMet is on top of, the need to rehabilitate and maintain, and in some cases replace assets. So this new FTA requirement will actually further bolster that effort and give us some new tools to assess the need to repair and replace, and we'll continue to prioritize items based on the condition of assets, safety and security, reliability, and replacement costs. And Dee may have something to add on that subject.
Actually, Nancy is our project manager on asset management. I'm happy to let her elaborate.
Great. So as Member Baumann stated, asset management planning is definitely not new to us. We have a capital projects committee that meets monthly and looks at all those requests and the repairs, the replacements, enhancements, expansion. And so in the question of, what are we going to do first? Well, we've already been doing it, so it's not like there's going to be something new that we're doing. What it will do is enhance what we're doing by better defining down to the individual component those items that need to be repaired and replaced. So when you look at a bus, you can look at a bus as a whole, but we are going to actually take that apart into individual components and be tracking on that basis. So it's going to give us help us enhance our prioritization of certain assets and the replacement of that on an ongoing basis. And it includes existing assets along with expansion. And within the project itself, we have hired CH2M to assist us through the development of the plan itself, the initial inventorying and condition assessment, taking the development of the actual tools that we're utilizing. We are approximately, I'd say, halfway done with the inventory and condition assessment, and anticipate being completed with that at the end of the calendar year.
By having this be a federal initiative, will this allow you to compare other transit areas with yourself, so you can see how you're doing with your asset management to others? I mean, is that
That's
one of
what
the
we're
outcomes?
told.
Okay. I was wondering why this is a federal initiative when I know you guys have already been doing some of this already. You would think comparability would be one of the benefits from a federal initiative. Okay, that's what you've been told. And speaking of DC, our last question is, with the new administration in Washington, DC, more than the usual amount of uncertainty seems to be surrounding federal funds. We assume that you have committed federal funding that probably will not be affected, but any new projects that are in the planning stages especially, such as the Southwest Corridor, might be impacted by these uncertainties. Do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, maybe we could ask Bernie Bottomley and Neil McFarland to tag team on this one.
Happy to respond to that. When you look at the federal funds that TriMet receives, they really come in two different buckets. One bucket is programmatic, so those are funds that come to us on an annual basis that are not discretionary. They come out of the Federal Transportation Trust Fund. That fund is authorized in the FAST Act until 2020, so we don't anticipate any dramatic change in the formula funds that we receive on an annual basis. Those typically go into operations, elderly and disabled programs, and maintenance of the system. The other category is capital investment grants. Those are new starts and small starts. New starts support projects like light rail construction. Small starts fund projects like the Division Bus Rapid Transit program. The administration's what they call the skinny budget indicated that those programs would be phased out, although existing grant agreements would be honored. So the remaining funds that are due TriMet for the Orange Line construction, the federal funding takes a little time to catch up with the construction. Those aren't implicated. The administration's indicated that they will honor that agreement. But they have suggested phasing out the capital infrastructure program. At the same time, they've talked about $1 trillion infrastructure increase in what the federal government is supporting. So there may be some plan to incorporate those programs into that strategy. Separate from the administration, we've had conversations with the members of Congress and their staffs who actually write the legislation, and they've indicated very strong continued support for the capital investment grant programs, and have said that there won't be a bill passed, at least on the Senate side, without those programs included in it. So there's very strong support on the Hill. And then I would say that the Federal Transit Administration continues to indicate to Portland, to TriMet and other transit districts around the country that they should continue to develop projects that would be submitted for federal funding in the construction grant program. So, so far, the indications are we should continue to move forward with our planning efforts. Our timing is about right. We don't have any projects that need funding today, so we have time to see how this plays out as we move forward.
When would the Southwest Corridor project be ready to ask for federal funds?
So we still have a couple of years to go on the planning process before we'd be in a position to submit for federal funding.
Sounds like your government relations team must be busy both in Salem and in
There's
DC.
a lot going on, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I have another.
Okay. Did anyone sign up? Craig, I saw you went.
No, no one has signed up to speak.
Okay. So thank you all for your.
David, could I ask
sure.
a question? Thanks.
Okay.
Just
so got me.
I was wondering about, you spoke about the safety management system as being one of kind of the key investments for the upcoming year, and I don't have a good sense for what all is entailed in the safety management system and what the emphasis of that is. Could somebody add a little color to that for us?
A lot of the funding for it are both some consultants to help us as well as training. And I'll let Harry get into the details a little bit more. Yeah.
So many of the aspects of our current program are actually embedded in the safety management system plan that's being developed. It's really taking more of a risk-based approach to how we manage safety on a day-to-day basis, and assuring that those control measures that we have in place are actually working effectively and remain robust, so that we address the safety issues on a continuing and daily basis.
And can you just list for me kind of what the key safety metrics that you're targeting are?
So there are several.
Yeah.
One of which, so that's something that's new for this plan as well, is that we have specific safety targets. We've just developed a business plan. Those same targets are embedded in the business plan. They involve bus and rail collisions and worker injuries, principally.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you all for your contributions to the discussion this morning. And with no other speakers, I will close the hearing part of.
I just want to. Oh well, I'm good at this. Maybe we can give the board here the economic impact of the Orange Line to the community as far as jobs and 1 to 5, all the multipliers people put to work, how many minority and women contractors have worked on this type of projects. Portland, TriMet is #2 in the country for MWESB contractors, not just construction. So that's part of our vision or goal. But I'd like to see, just quickly so they know maybe not how much money has been
You bet, and
generated.
there's not a lot of numbers that stick in my head, but one was that we actually predicted and actually produced on the order of 14,000 jobs during the construction of the overall project. That includes both directly on the project as well as those that are induced to the multiplier effect that Board Member Esmond noted. We also have, which we could certainly provide to your staff, a really interesting one-pager that really shows the geographic distribution of those jobs, the geographic distribution of the contractors that were involved, and that geographic distribution, of course, around Oregon and Southwest Washington, but also nationally. And frankly, it's one of the messages that's very important at a national level right now, that these projects actually do produce jobs, not just locally, but nationally. And so they're really quite important to the kind of economic lift that the infrastructure is obviously hoped for.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that would be great if you could provide the one-pager, and
Yep.
maybe we'll have a question on it. And next year or the future year, I mean, as the Southwest Corridor project rolls out, it'll be interesting to see with your excellent performance then in those areas on the Orange Line, what your targets are for future expansion.
Actually, I have a question on that right now, because PSU is also, of course, tracking our MWESB expenditures. And is it policy that you spend a certain percentage, or is it statute that requires you to spend a certain percentage, or is it just?
Well, we do,
Finance?
and John can go through some of the details, but we do establish a goal that is actually something we report to the federal government. But I would tell you that we generally exceed those goals because it's our practice, and as I've always said, it's embedded as a value within TriMet that these resources in our construction projects need to look and be staffed by the community we serve. And so we make a great effort. And I think it's an industry-leading effort, candidly, as Board Member Esmond noted, to secure those results. And we're happy to have other conversation with you about that, because I think it goes well beyond being sort of if you will, a statutory goal. It really is that people have to be motivated to make it work. And I'm very pleased that we have a team at TriMet that are so motivated.
Okay.
Can I ask one more?
We should probably get going.
gotta
We're over our time. I want to thank you all for your contributions and being first. You always set the high bar for everyone else coming after you, so thank you very much. And with that, I'll close the hearing, and then we'll open up a regular meeting of our TSCC just to go through the budget. So did you, James or Mark, do you have any comments on the budget?
I would just second your comments that TriMet always does set a very high bar, so thank you, directors and staff, for your excellent presentation this morning.
And then Craig? Did you have?
You have in front of you the certification letter. We have no recommendations and no objections to anything in the budget. We find that working with your staff is very efficient. The budget is well done. It's first, and it's only one fund, and that counts a lot for us. So.
Okay, thanks. With that, may I have a motion from one of the commissioners authorizing the commission to sign the certification letter as recommended by the staff?
I move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Great. May I have a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. With that, thank you, and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.